When former relationships encounter unexpected circumstances, they can bring not only emotional moments but also complex situations that change the lives of everyone involved. In this case, my story began with a 5-year romance between my ex-wife and my father. At the beginning of this story, there was a moment when my parents might have started experiencing disagreements or misunderstandings in their marriage. Perhaps this led my father to seek solace and understanding elsewhere. Meeting my ex-wife may have been something more significant than casual acquaintances, and over time, their relationship became deeper and more intimate. Gradually, my relationship with my wife started to change. I noticed she became more distant or reserved than before. This caused me concern and even suspicion. When I eventually learned the truth that a romantic connection had developed between my ex-wife and father, it was undoubtedly a huge shock. The story took a new turn when my ex-wife disappeared. She likely chose to leave to avoid a more complicated situation and to preserve some part of her honor and dignity. Perhaps she realized her decision would impact me, my father, and everyone who knew about the situation. My life undoubtedly couldn't remain unchanged. I faced immense emotional difficulties, such as anger, resentment, disappointment, and sadness. I felt betrayed by both my ex-wife and my own father. Months passed, and I couldn't shake off this suppressed state. I told myself, I can't just sit like this forever. I decided to focus on my work and career, but even that wasn't as simple as it sounded. I sent my resume everywhere possible, having previously worked in the field of reporting, and I had a lot of experience to share. After all the effort, I finally received an interview invitation from one of the companies that seemed like the perfect fit for me. During the interview, I tried to showcase my skills and knowledge, emphasized my experience and passion for the work. My answers to the interviewer's questions left a positive impression, and I was invited to the next stage, a technical interview. I delved into preparation, reviewed key aspects of my specialization, and worked on typical tasks related to the position. The technical interview proved to be a challenge, but thanks to my preparation, I managed to handle the given tasks. My solutions were highly evaluated, and I was invited for a final interview with the company's senior management. At this stage, I could discuss my goals, ambitions, and how I saw my contribution to the company's development. My ideas found understanding, and I was assured that I was an excellent fit for the position. While focusing on my career, my emotions remained tumultuous, but the drive for success at work became a kind of motivation for me. I started paying more attention to my job tasks, striving to demonstrate my professional potential. Over the course of a few months, I worked diligently and achieved noticeable results, which brought me satisfaction and the understanding that I could overcome challenges. Gradually, I began to realize that I couldn't control the actions of others, but I could control my reactions to situations. This helped me step out of the shadow of the painful past and start moving forward. Soon, I began to perceive my job not only as a means to achieve success but also as a path to personal growth and development. I gained new confidence in my abilities and started setting ambitious goals that I might not have even considered before. Reflecting on the situation with my ex-wife and father, the idea came to my mind to visit my mother. After all, I had no idea if she knew anything about this situation or not. I hadn't spoken to her for a year, since the betrayal by my wife. It was time to pay her a visit. I went to the old address that I remembered, not knowing if my mother still lived there. But I was right, and the house was just the same as from my childhood, the same red roof, green grass on the lawn, and the gnome that stood on the lawn, with whom I loved to play as a child. As I looked at all these sights, tears began to well up, as I had lived here with my father as well, who had now disappeared from me along with my former beloved wife. I found the doorbell. It was covered in dust. It seems like no one has called here in a while, I thought. And there I was, after a year of separation, deciding to ring that doorbell. I expected to meet my mother in perfect health, as she always had been. However, my joyful return was overshadowed by heavy news. The house carried an atmosphere of sadness and worry. My mother, who had always been my pillar of support, was now in a state that offered little hope of recovery. In conversations with doctors, I learned she had an incurable illness. I had always believed in the power of science and the miracles of medicine. Determinedly, I began exploring all possible treatment options, teetering on the edge of despair. With all these events, my career started to decline. I didn't want to think about anything other than helping my mother. My mother remained the only close person to me who had never betrayed me, instead pushing me towards better things. If I were to lose her, I didn't know what I would do. Soon, I found out about an experimental procedure that might potentially help my mother. Although the chances of success were slim, I took the risky decision. Weeks of waiting and preparation passed. On the day of the surgery, I sat in the waiting room, feeling my heart pounding in anticipation. The surgery was complex, but the surgeons did everything they could. Days turned into weeks, and I anxiously awaited news. One day during a hospital visit, 2 doctors who had been part of my mother's operation approached me. Their faces were tense, but one of them smiled and nodded at me. My heart raced as I stood up to meet them. "The operation was successful," he said, "and your mother is starting to recover." My joy was immeasurable. I couldn't believe that everything was okay. I couldn't wait to sit down and talk to my mother about everything that had been happening in my life. The long weeks of waiting and worry finally came to an end. Some time passed, and my mother began showing signs of recovery. Doctors were amazed by her resilience and determination to overcome difficulties after such a complicated surgery. With each passing day, she grew stronger, and we spent a lot of time together, supporting each other, talking to each other. I told her the entire story of what happened with my ex-wife and my father.
"You know, Mike, that event affected me too, as your father is my husband. I tried to reach out to you, to talk to you all these months, but unsuccessfully."
And then, I felt a deep shame that I hadn't initially talked to my own mother first, but had gotten distracted by building my career. But now everything was fine, it seemed to me. Months passed, things were falling into place, and my mother appeared to be in perfect health and full of energy. One day, I found a note in my mother's jacket about some chemotherapy. I took it out to read and froze. It mentioned a second diagnosis of my mother's that she had hidden from me and never mentioned, a rare and incurable heart disease. From acquaintances who were doctors, I learned that my mother had only a few months left to live. I was lost, I didn't know what to do. I decided to talk to my mother about it. I sat down beside her in our cozy living room. The soft glow of candles created an atmosphere of tranquility, but my heart was full of restlessness. I looked at my mother, her eyes radiating tenderness and love. "Mom," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "It's hard for me to talk about this, but I want us to discuss." My mother smiled understandingly and took my hand in hers.
"Michael, I know what you want to talk about."
My words got stuck in my throat for a moment, but I managed to continue. "Mom, you know that the illness they found again is incurable." My mother nodded, gently squeezing my hand. "Yes, Mike, I realize that. Medicine doesn't always have all the answers. But that doesn't mean I'll give up. I want to spend every moment I have left with you." Tears started welling up in my eyes, but I continued. "Mom, I'm so afraid of losing you. I don't know how to live on without your support, without your wisdom." My mother patted my hand and smiled. "My dear, even if I'm not here physically, I'll always be a part of your heart. You're brave and strong, and I'm proud of who you've become. Just remember, our love and connection will never fade." Her words brought me some solace, but the heavy burden of sadness remained. We embraced and spent several more hours together, sharing our past, present, and future. That evening, we grew closer to each other like never before, sharing our fears, hopes, and feelings. With each passing day, I learned the value of the time we spent together and learned to accept the inevitable. While my mother's illness didn't promise a future, their bond and love remained unbreakable, helping them overcome all difficulties together. The following months flew by quickly, but an overwhelming anxiety remained in my heart. I devoted all my care to my mother, spending much time with her, and every moment became precious to me. However, one day, on a chilly autumn morning, as the sun slowly rose over the horizon, my mother was no longer by my side. I woke up to find that her heart had stopped beating. My world shattered into pieces. The loss hit me like a hammer, completely overwhelming me. I sat by her bedside, holding her cold hand in mine. Tears flowed uncontrollably, and emotions surged within me, the bitterness of loss, the ache of grief, and the realization that I would never hear her voice again, see her smile, or hear her advice. Through my tears, I remembered our conversations and how we talked about the inevitability of illness, but also about how to maintain connection and love regardless of circumstances. My mother had always been my anchor, and now I had to move forward without her. The grief stayed with me, but over time, I found the strength to continue my journey. I remembered her lessons, her wisdom, and her endless tenderness. Memories of her were always with me, supporting me through difficult moments. A week passed, and the day of the funeral arrived. Friends, relatives, and acquaintances gathered at the funeral to honor the memory of a woman who was always ready to help and support. They shared stories of how my mother had helped them in tough times, how she raised her children with love and care, and how her kindness had left a mark in the hearts of many. I was grateful that such warm words were spoken about my mother. The ceremony was solemn, yet filled with tenderness. Loved ones adorned the burial site with flowers that my mother loved, and they set up a small photographic corner where everyone could remember the happy moments spent with her. The funeral became a sort of farewell to a person who brought so much joy and light to the lives of those around her. As everyone dispersed and I remained alone at the cemetery, my gaze accidentally fell on two dark silhouettes slowly approaching from a distance. My heart raced slightly. Who could be here at this moment? As the silhouettes drew closer, I began to distinguish their features. It was a couple, a tall man and a shorter woman, dressed in dark cloaks that fluttered in the wind. They walked calmly, but their presence provoked contemplation. Each of their steps seemed somehow special, as if they carried a secret or a message. Black scarves covered their faces, their identities hidden. When they finally reached me, I silently stared at them, as if words had abandoned me. Finally, I managed to whisper with effort, "Who are you?" As they removed their scarves, I was stunned. It was my ex-wife and my father, the ones who had betrayed me before. I started shouting at them that they both had no right to be here, my voice trembling through tears. My father approached me and hugged me.
"I have no right to apologize to you, but I didn't want things to turn out this way."
I didn't want to continue the dialogue with them. I simply walked away. The weather began to change, rain started to fall. I just walked, and walked some more. My mind was blank, devoid of any thoughts. I couldn't believe that all of this was happening to me. Glancing back at my mother's grave, I saw the two dark silhouettes holding hands, getting into a car, and disappearing into the thick fog.